Mike asks, if Cain and Abel were Adam's children, how could there be other people that Cain ran into when he left? Okay, this is a classic question, Mike. I'm glad you asked it. You got to remember that there were a couple hundred years that had passed. All right, how do we know this? All right, so let's go back to Genesis chapter 4. All right, so here we have Cain and Abel. We've got the whole story, of course. And so Cain goes out, and et cetera, et cetera. They do all this different stuff. And then we come to the end of this time. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth, for God had appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. As for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. All right, so then we go to chapter 5, and this is an account of all the different people. So it says, Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness after his own image and named him Seth. All right, so 130 years have passed before Seth comes around. So, well, so it wasn't a couple hundred years, so I take that back. But still, decades, many decades have passed. And look, people do what people do, right? You know, Adam and Eve have children, and then those children have children. Back in the early days, the first days, the genetic disorders would have been practically, I say practically, nil. And so it would have been okay to marry a close sister, because everybody was a close sister back then. Now, as time goes on and our genome is actually degrading, you want to marry somebody who's not your next of kin, because that will lead to a much higher rate of birth defects. But back then, that was no problem. So, you know, again, children have children, and that's how it goes. And there's no reason to assume that they would not have had children by the time they were able to physically have children. And so, you know, we could think, you know, 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. You know, I mean, you know, not a lot has changed, quite frankly. We see young people getting active, and babies come, right? So again, you could have different societal expectations, and then you could have a lot of people. Now, we're not looking at millions at this point, but certainly we could be talking about thousands and thousands of people. Perhaps hundreds of thousands. It's hard to say exactly, you know, how many people we're talking about. We can't put a figure on it, really. But there could have been a lot of people. And so as Cain and Abel, the reason they're mentioned, not because they're the first children, but they are the first brother and brother who murdered. That's what makes Cain and Abel so significant. Not because they were the first, but because that's the first murder. And so the first murder is recorded in the Bible. And if you look at those first chapters, you'll see that we go from perfection, then we go to sin entering in through Adam, and then it says that Cain kills his brother Abel. And then in verse 26, it's an unfortunate translation, but it actually says, then the name of the calling on the name of God was profaned. That's what the Hebrew actually says. Calling on the name of the Lord, or the name of Yehovah, was profaned. And then we come to chapter 6, and guess what? And then we have this. Then we have the sons of God who are taking the daughters of men, and they're having these strange hybrid children. So we see a downward progression, not like, you know, things are kind of bad. Then there's this, oh, they start all praising the Lord in Genesis 4:26, and then things get bad again. No, it's just down, 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 down until God finally destroys the world in a flood. So, great question.